Okay, I'm dying to hear his review of the most talked about movie in the last several weeks. A Star is Born. He is around the
movie block with The Rock.
He is Rocco Pasafume.
Thank you, Howie. Yes, as aforementioned, the movie I'm doing is none other than A Star is Born. It's directed by Bradley Cooper, and it stars Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. It is the third remake of this movie. It was originally made in 1937 that starred Janet Gaynor, and then it was remade again in 1954, and that starred Judy Garland, and then probably most famously in 1976, which starred Barbra Streisand. This time around, I mean, the story is pretty much, familiar story. A musician, Jackson Maine, played by Cooper, helps a young singer, Allie, find her fame. Allie is played by the one and only Lady Gaga. And even as age and alcoholism sends his own career into a downward spiral. Yes, the thing coming into this movie is the fact that this is the third remake of this movie is pretty daunting because, when you have, the same story going around, it runs the risk of it being a little too familiar and a little too cliched. But what Bradley Cooper brings to the table, and as well as Lady Gaga, is the fact that they really managed to make this seemingly familiar material feel very fresh. And I think it's wise. As much as Bradley Cooper makes a pretty fine debut as a filmmaker, it's a little rough in terms of his aesthetic as a filmmaker. There's moments where the movie's a little choppy, and it kind of doesn't have the best flow in the middle of the movie. But what's great about the movie is the fact that because he's somebody who has acted for so long, he clearly understands actors and understands their power. So with both himself and with Lady Gaga, they managed to create these, really bring these characters to life and move them past any potential of cliche. I mean, they really make these characters feel real and feel lived. And especially Lady Gaga, you really get a sense that the movie's very tailor-made for, what has been her life story and her career as a pop singer. And with that, you get a real sense of life breathed into these characters. And that's very, very important to make a movie, especially a movie that's been told now for the third time, resonate in a very powerful way. I think the fact that it's been pretty long enough, it's been over 40 years since the last Star is Born came out. I think there's a sense that time has been very good for a remake. I think the problem with most remakes is that there's a sense that the long shadow of the original movie still tends to hover over it. You don't really see that at all with this. You see the timing is right for a fresh take on this kind of story, and yes, it is a very, very fresh take. It's also, the elements, the emotional elements, particularly of the movie, work out perfectly. The songs are fantastic. You could tell a lot was put into the way the songs were put together, the way the singing was put together by both Cooper and Gaga. So you really get a sense that a lot of this was really well put together. And that's really what makes a movie to begin with. Is a lot of it is based on, good acting, good screenwriting, and just good storytelling, regardless of how familiar the structure of it may be. But overall, I really do feel that Lady Gaga's take on Star is Born, as well as Bradley Cooper particularly, definitely makes this one of the best movies of the year. I definitely feel like there's going to be Oscar nominations going around, not only for those two, but particularly for its supporting cast, as like Sam Elliott, and particularly Andrew Dice Clay, who has a very surprisingly great role in this movie. So there's a lot of great acting across the board, and I think that will really give this movie a renewed sense of power and really show that a remake can definitely hit just as much of the same powerful notes as its predecessors. So I give A Star is Born 4 out of 5 stars. So thank you.
All right, great job, Rocco. And I just want to touch on a few things. I happened to see the movie, and one thing I thought prominently coming out of this movie is that on this show, we've touched a lot on suicide prevention.
Yeah.
And we talked about suicide a lot. And in recent times, two famous people have taken their own lives, Anthony Bourdain, CNN, and Kate Spade. And a big part of the movie was Bradley Cooper, the character, taking his own life.
Yeah.
And my thought, and I like to hear what Rocco thinks, is
Yes.
that there was a scene in the movie where Bradley Cooper had just come out of rehab,
Right.
was just in the recovery phase,
Right.
and he'd been through a difficult ride because he had met this woman. At the time, she was a nobody working at a burlesque.
Yes.
He was a major superstar.
Right.
And then, because he took her under her wing, she became a bigger star than he was. So she was on her way up, he was on her way down,
Right.
and he struggled severely with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And he had just come out of rehab, and he was at a low point when there was a scene where Lady Gaga's manager came over the house and really, really, in a negative way, put him down, telling him that you should be out of her life. You embarrassed her. You're a nobody. You're no good.
Yes.
She would do much better without you. And he just stood there and didn't say a word. And shortly thereafter, took his own life.
Yeah.
My thought, Rocco, was that, and my wife said the same thing, is that maybe he would have done that anyway. But
I
to
totally
me,
agree.
but to me, those insults
Right.
pushed him to take his own life. How do you view that?
I think it definitely adds color to and a motivation for why Jackson ended up taking his own life. I think a lot of what I get about this kind of story is that it's very operatic. So you're kind of like swirling in all this, this kind of drama that's unfolding. There's a saying, the manager of the Rolling Stones said it. He said that, a play has to have a finale, somebody has to die. It's sort of like it's almost like he's saying it as if it was the nature of the beast in these kinds of movies. But in terms of that, I think you're very much right. I think that with how everything unfolded, Jackson was such a tragic figure already that it just seemed like he was sort of that a very tragic end was sort of inevitable for him. And I think by having the manager, kind of give that extra kind of punch to the gut, I think it kind of creates a motivation that. And because the manager's sort of the antagonist character of the piece. That's how we're supposed to view him. But I think like you said, I think that it just seemed like he was on sort of that. It seemed like that's where it was going to end up with him anyway. I think that if Jackson had been able to pull through, I think that would have been possible. I think that if he could have kind of said, what, in spite of what he says, I'm going to pull through. But I think in terms of the nature of the dynamics of the movie, it just seemed like that's what it called for. Unfortunately, was this guy was meant to have a tragic, kind of situation, and just sort of was the natural dynamic of the story. But you're right. I think that having the manager be this kind of antagonist towards him, it makes you, I guess, it gives you a more sympathetic ear of what happens to Jackson. So I think having that, and it served the story relatively well, because in a sense it makes you feel a bit more sorry for what happened to Jackson in terms of how this kind of downward spiral occurs with him.
Yeah, I mean, but my thought is, just talking about suicide in general,
Yes.
is that when a person is in a vulnerable, weak state,
Yeah.
and someone is so negative towards them,
Right.
and when they're in a weakened and vulnerable state, like he
Yes.
was,
Totally.
it was like the final straw. That
Oh,
it was
absolutely.
like, you know what, my life isn't worth living. He's telling me that I'm not good enough to be near my
Yeah.
wife. I'm useless. I'm nobody,
Right.
and I think that maybe perhaps he would have taken his life eventually, but he
Right.
wouldn't have taken his life right
yeah.
then and there. I think that was
Yeah.
what caused him
Definitely.
to take his life right at the moment. But the
Yeah.
other thing I want to say is that
Right.
what I felt most incredible about the movie
Right.
was that it was Bradley Cooper singing for the first time.
Yes.
He was amazing.
Totally.
It was Bradley Cooper's debut as a director, and I always think the most amazing, incredible thing someone could do is to be a lead actor and a director
Yes.
in the same film.
Right.
Because it's just so much responsibility. And the other thing is that Lady Gaga is known as a a great performer as a singer, but her acting in this movie was phenomenal. So I think the fact that so many of these people took on larger, such huge roles and nailed them was really, really so impressive about this movie.
Totally. I think what that goes back to is, having the right director. I think Cooper was a good director. I think that he really, because he's an actor doing this, he understands the great, what it takes to really give a great performance. So you have somebody that can really work with an actor and really bring them to their full potential. And you have that, especially with Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga has had some acting experience, and she's gotten a lot of accolades for, especially when she did the hotel season of American Horror Story. But I really do feel that with this, he really got her full potential out, because part of what made her so good in this movie is that a lot of this was based on her own situation coming up in her career. So the platform for this movie, it was perfect for her because it enabled her to deal with things that were based on her own personal experiences. So it enabled her to really give like a fully embodied performance. And I think that was really key to why the movie resonates with so many people. You get a sense of relatability. You get a sense that they really feel the performances, that it's not just them playing characters. You really get a sense that they really embody this world that they live in. So I think a lot of the spirit of it definitely, Bradley Cooper definitely brought a lot to it in terms of him, really bringing himself and bringing Lady Gaga and bringing his fellow castmates to their full potential as actors.
Okay, great. Rocco, great job.
Thank you.
Star is Born.
Appreciate it.